Hello there, and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. I'm in beautiful Battleground, Pennsylvania. I'm coming to you live from PNC Park, home of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Sorry, Baltimore, this might be America's best Major League ballpark. We are here in the Keystone State because of the big contest coming up. I'm not talking about Phillies Astros or Eagles Steelers, but the huge midterm slate next month that could dictate the balance of power in the Senate and decide who oversees this battleground state's next presidential election. Senate control runs through Pennsylvania. There's also a governor's race here on the ballot, a couple of House toss-up seats that we're keeping an eye on as well. So 13 days out from Election Day, we are laser-focused on this state. Keystone State gives a whole new meaning to that nickname, right? It is the keystone to the Senate. So let's start with the marquee Senate race here. Last night was the one and only debate between the Democratic nominee John Fetterman and the Republican nominee Mehmet Oz. The Fetterman campaign tried to significantly lower expectations ahead of time, as Fetterman is still recovering from a stroke he suffered just days before his primary victory in May. There was a closed captioning system on stage last night that was there to help him with his ongoing auditory processing issues. But even so, what we saw last night in answer after answer was a candidate that did struggle to articulate his thoughts clearly, and someone who had a tough time stringing his answers together. Listen to this exchange from Fetterman on fracking.
I've always supported fracking, and I always believe that independence with our energy is critical, and we can't be held, ransom to somebody like Russia. I've always believed that energy independence is critical, and I've always believed that, and I do support fracking.
You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand and I do support fracking.
For what it's worth, Fetterman did not have to agree to this debate. And after seeing his performance, there are a lot of Democrats wondering why his campaign decided to put him in this position. To be sure, while Fetterman had his struggles, Oz stumbled a few times as well, particularly with this answer on abortion that has already been turned into a digital ad by the Fetterman campaign.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
That line, local political leaders, is something you're probably going to hear a lot from the Fetterman side of things over the next 13 days. Folks, elections are generally not won or lost on the debate stage, at least on the level below president. And in this political environment, party identity may matter more to voters than anything else. In fact, if you look at our most recent NBC poll, about 80% of Republicans and an equal number of Democrats, 80%, say the other side's policies would lead America, democracy to ruin. So it stands to reason that a lot of those voters are going to back their party's preferred candidate, no matter what qualms they have about the candidate themselves. We also saw the power of party ID in the number of voters who told our pollsters they'd back a morally compromised candidate, particularly if it meant keeping the other side from winning. But in a tight race, everything matters. If this is a race decided by 50,000 votes, then yes, this debate will be that impactful. This morning, I sat down with three self-identified independent voters here in Pennsylvania to find out what matters most to these swing voters and how last night's debate could factor into their decision. Here's part of our discussion when I asked them their impressions on Fetterman's performance and how it colored their thinking ahead of Election Day.
I think it was very difficult to watch. I kind of felt sorry for him up there. Of course, he had a stroke and he's suffering, and his doctors say that, he's fit to serve, but I had a hard time comprehending what he was trying to, convey.
I felt almost, bad for John Fetterman. I think there's no question that his social media campaign has been very sharp and good and appealing. But when he got on the debate stage, I couldn't really understand a lot of the points he was making. And on the other side, I thought Oz looked pretty sharp. I think sounded like a politician. And I don't know that Fetterman was really able to convey many of his positions on issues.
I have a background background in the military as a medic, and saw many people suffer traumatic brain injuries. So I keep that in mind as I am, viewing what Fetterman is going through. He's healing, and I don't think we would hold that against anybody else if they had a broken arm and they were healing. So he's on his road to recovery, and we kind of have to keep that in mind. It's the human side of him.
Is there something Fetterman can do to reassure you?
I think it's doubtful.
I think about, my buddies that came home with traumatic brain injuries, and that's exactly what a stroke is.
Right.
So keeping that in mind, and seeing how so many of my friends have come home and functioning perfectly fine. So I keep that in my mind as I consider what everybody else saw on the stage last night.
I think if he faces the voters, faces the public a little bit more often, what I'm saying? I think if he can show that he is improving, you know what I mean, and that if he is going to be in office, his injury or his stroke won't affect his ability to serve.
I also asked those voters what's weighing on them and what's really driving their vote on November 8th. Here was their response.
I think number one, what comes down to me for what I vote, I'm a young, about to be professional, and I think I'm looking at the world right now, and I'm looking at economic conditions. I'm looking at what the economy's doing, prices of goods, gas, things like that, and what it's going to be like for me to get a mortgage one day. I'm looking at that economic situation, and I think more than anything that's driving my vote. So I'm looking for a candidate that's going to provide that. I'm
undecided because I'm demoralized with electoral politics altogether. You know what I'm saying? And
why is that? Tell me more about that.
Well, it's because the neighborhood that I'm from, for example, I'm from Homewood, and whether it's a Democrat or Republican in the White House or in the governor's mansion, or a Democrat, in the mayor's house, our neighborhood never changes. You know what I'm saying? So, like, my concern is like social economic conditions, particularly poor and black neighborhoods all over this state.
I have a young son, so I am thinking about some of the social issues that are going on in our society, and raising my son and what the future is going to look like for him. So much like Mike with the economy and inflation, it's hurting all of us, but also with social issues and the world that I want my son to be able to grow into.
Marilyn, are you satisfied with these four nominees, the governor and Senate race, or do you feel as if they're sort of thrust upon you?
Yeah, they're thrust upon me. Yeah. Absolutely. They just, Mike put it well, they're out of touch. They're out of touch with what Pennsylvanians are.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.